In this video, I'm going to talk about the genetics of your blood type. I already made another video on what it means to be blood type A positive or B negative. So this video is only really going to make sense if you already understand blood type and what a blood type is, because I'm just going to get straight into the genetics. So there are two blood type systems that we care about. There's the ABO blood type system, and then there's the RHD blood type system. The ABO blood type system, that is responsible for blood types O, A, and B, as you might have guessed. The RHD blood type system is responsible for the positive or negative that you sometimes see reported after the letter. And because these are two completely separate genes, we will look at them separately in terms of inheritance. So let's start with the ABO blood group. ABO blood group system. Start with that. So remember, this references the carbohydrates that are kind of stuck onto the surfaces of your red blood cells. So there's carbohydrate A for blood type A, carbohydrate B for blood type B, carbohydrates A and B for blood type AB, and none of these A or B carbohydrates for blood type O. O is kind of like a 0 for the A and B carbohydrate. So this means that there are 3 versions of this gene floating around the general population. A version of a gene we call an allele. So we have 3 alleles. Now, every individual, of course, can only have 2 out of these 3. You get 1 allele from your mother and 1 allele from your father, right? We've got 2 copies of every gene. Your mother and your father might give you different versions of that gene, but you get to only have 2. So this makes notation a little bit complicated because we have 3 versions of this gene floating around in the general population. Each individual only has 2. Now this makes notation a little bit complicated because every person, different people have different combinations of these 3, pairing off the 3 in different ways. Different pairs interact with each other in different ways. So let's take a look at that more closely, at what I mean more closely. So first of all, list the 3 alleles or 3 different versions of this ABO blood group system gene. You have carbohydrate A, and actually I'll call it glycoprotein. It's really more of a glycoprotein. So glycoprotein A, that's the molecule that you find on the surface of the red blood cells of people who are blood type A. So that is responsible for blood type A production. People who are blood type B, their red blood cells display a glycoprotein called glycoprotein B. And then a 3rd allele is for production of none of these. No production of A and no production of B. None of these glycoproteins. So 1 allele codes for the production of glycoprotein A, 1 allele codes for the production of glycoprotein B, and 1 allele codes for the production of none of these glycoproteins. All right, so this is how we're going to annotate this. So allele 1, we're going to display by a capital I and a superscript A. Y and I, it's just kind of a placeholder, and it's because, like I said, dominance and recessiveness is sort of complicated with blood type genes, as you will see. So glycoprotein B, the allele is annotated as a capital I with a superscript capital B. And then the code for not producing any of these glycoproteins is indicated by a lowercase I. Okay. So we know that there are 4 phenotypes out there for the ABO blood group system. So let's list these phenotypes. Phenotypes is, again, like what you look like, what your physical expression of your genetic code is. And then we'll look at the genotypes that produce these. So you can have a phenotype for blood type A. So blood type A. And here, and I'll put genotype over here so you know what we're about to do. Genotype. Genotype is what your genetic code actually is. So blood type A, blood type B. You could also be blood type AB. Or you could be blood type O. And I'm going to draw a little red blood cell to go with these because, so I'm going to say that glycoprotein A, like I did in my last video, looks like a little triangle for A. Glycoprotein B looks like this. And then there's a no expression allele, right? So a person who is blood type A, this is a red blood cell, oops, abbreviated as RBC for red blood cell. Someone who's blood type A has these little triangle, they're not really triangles, that's just my shorthand for them, right? These little glycoproteins that are called glycoprotein A on the surface. Someone who's blood type B will have the glycoprotein B on the surface of their red blood cells. I don't have a lot of space here, so sorry about that. Someone who's AB is going to have both glycoprotein A and glycoprotein B on the surface. So this is the phenotype. This is what the red blood cells look like, right? The phenotype is the physical expression of what's in the genetic code. Someone who's blood type O, their red blood cells are a clean slate when it comes to this glycoprotein. All right, so then let's look at the genotypes, or the genetic codes, the allele combination that can lead to these four different phenotypes. We have, let me go back to black here. So to be blood type A, allele A is dominant to O. Allele A is dominant to O. So the capital I superscript A is dominant to the lowercase I, which means that there are two ways a person can end up being blood type A. The person can inherit the A allele from one parent and also inherit it from the other parent. So mom and dad each gave this person the A allele. Or they could receive, if you're blood type A, you may have received an A allele from one parent and the O allele, or the allele that results in no glycoprotein production, from the other parent. This is because the O allele, or the no glycoprotein allele, is recessive relative to the A allele. What that means is, whenever these two, the A and the O allele, whenever they occur together as a pair, the recessive, or the O, is masked. So this person is not going to be both A and O. They're just going to be A. They're just going to be whatever the dominant allele is. It still matters that they have this secret, hidden, recessive allele because they can pass it to their offspring. So you might be blood type A, but unless you know your genotype, you could have a child with blood type O, because you might pass this O allele to your offspring even though you yourself are not expressing it. So there's two ways to get that. That's why there's two ways to get that genotype, because A is dominant to O, so whenever A and O together, the A is dominant, the A gets expressed, and the person will be blood type A. So either an A from both parents or an A from one parent and the recessive O from another, and the recessive gets masked. Blood type B is very similar. It's basically the same thing. So there's two, blood type, the allele for B is dominant to O, so we're going to see the same thing here. There's two ways to end up being blood type B. You either get a B allele from both parents, Or you get the dominant B allele from one parent and the recessive allele that results in O, or no glycoprotein production, from the other parent, because the recessive allele gets completely masked by B, and so a person with this combination here will just end up as B. But they can, again, still pass that recessive allele on to their offspring. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated. Blood type AB. Well, allele A is dominant to O, allele B is dominant to O, but A and B are equally dominant. We call them co-dominant. So when the A allele and the B allele pair up together, they both get expressed equally. One is not dominant to the other in this case. So to be blood type AB, you receive an A allele from one parent and a B allele from the other parent. That's the only way to be AB. You need one of each. And blood type O, now remember this is the recessive allele. So if the allele that results in no glycoprotein production is paired with any other allele, it'll be masked. So the only way to express it, the only way to be blood type O with no glycoprotein production is to receive the recessive allele from both parents so that it's not masked by anything that's dominant. So that's blood type O. You receive the recessive no glycoprotein production from both parents. And I'm going to remind you that this doesn't mean no glycoprotein production at all, right? It's just not A and it's not B. No A, no B. There's other genes for other glycoproteins that this doesn't have anything to do with. All right, and then I think I'm seeing flashes on my screen, so hopefully this video goes smoothly. So that's the ABO blood group system. Now let's do the RHD blood group system. This is responsible for the positive or negative symbol at the end of the ABO blood group symbol. So, you know, people are A positive or A negative. So there's only two alleles here. So again, this is a completely different gene. Completely different. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the ABO blood group system. We just report them together so that all the information you need to consider blood compatibility for transfusions is all in one nice tidy package. But they don't actually have anything to do with each other. We just care about both of them individually because both of them can lead to dangerous blood type incompatibilities. So here are the two alleles. One allele is results in the production of glycoprotein, RHD, and we call that positive. Positive for RHD glycoprotein. And then the other allele is the allele for no RHD glycoprotein production. And that would be considered negative. And if I were to make a little symbol for that, in my last video, I said that RHD glycoprotein looks like that. So you have an allele to produce that glycoprotein, or you have an allele to not produce that glycoprotein. And then, let's see, to track this genetically, we will symbolize these alleles in the following fashion. We'll have a capital D for the dominant allele and a lowercase d for the recessive allele. So no RHD glycoprotein production is recessive. Yes, glycoprotein RHD production is dominant. And so these combinations are fairly straightforward. So we'll have phenotype here. We'll track phenotype in this column. So the phenotypes, there's only two. There's blood type RHD positive or blood type RHD negative. And let's look at the genotypes that result in those. Genotypes. All right, well, because RhD positive is dominant, there's two ways that a person can be RhD positive. You can either receive a dominant allele from both parents or a dominant allele from one parent and the recessive allele from another, because the recessive allele is always masked when it's paired with a dominant. So if you get a dominant and a recessive together, remember that's called heterozygous, the dominant is always expressed. In this case, that means the person would be RhD positive. And then because RhD negative, or no production of this glycoprotein, is recessive, the only way for a person to express this recessive trait is if they receive the recessive allele from both parents. So homozygous recessive. And that's blood type genetics.